5 unbelievable horror stories from the backwoods that will haunt your nights. I never should have opened that door. I still hear the whispers. The chill of that moment crawls over my skin like 1,000 icy fingers. I was just sitting in my living room, minding my own business, flicking through random channels when my neighbor's frantic knock shattered the silence. It wasn't your usual friendly visit. There was something wrong. I could see it in her wild eyes, darting around like a hunted animal. The outside world seemed different that night. The darkness pressed against my windows, heavy and suffocating. The air smelled damp, like something rotten. Shadows danced in the corners, twisting like fingers reaching for me. I stepped outside, and a gust of cold wind slapped my face, whispering warnings I couldn't understand. The trees loomed taller in the night, their branches like bony hands clawing at the sky. I could almost hear them groaning, alive with secrets I was never meant to uncover. Have you seen the lights? She asked, voice shaking. Up on the ridge, they're not normal. My stomach twisted. Strange lights? We both knew the old tales. Flickering they were, darting through the trees. Some folks said it was just critters, or maybe drunk teenagers looking for fun. But deep down, I felt that prick of fear. As the night wore on, the weirdness escalated. I heard things, scratches on the walls, soft rustles in the bushes, unsettling giggles that shouldn't belong in the woods after dark. I tried to brush it off, but the air grew thick with an unseen presence. My heart thudded in my chest, desperate to escape. I wished I could go back to my routine, the mundane safety of my couch and TV. Just then, something moved in the tree line. I turned, breath hitching. Was it a deer? No. This was bigger, higher, wider. My gut screamed to run, but I stood frozen, rooted in panic. The weird lights flashed again. They were drawing nearer. The shadows danced and flickered like they had a life of their own, teasing me from the edges. My skin prickled. The laughter was closer now, echoing through the trees. It was wrong, too happy, too playful for this unsettling night. A figure stepped into the light, a shape twisting, bending. I caught my breath, the air smothering my lungs. It smiled at me, twisted and wide. The echo of that laughter pierced the darkness. And then a door slammed shut behind me, the sound reverberating through the silence. I whipped around as dread flooded my veins. I wasn't alone. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. I blinked, my mind racing as I turned back to the house. The door stood ajar, nearly inviting. But the shadows behind it pulsed with a malevolence that gripped my heart. I had left it wide open, a glaring invitation that now felt like a foolish mistake. The whispers slithered into my ears again, taunting me to step inside, to discover what awaited. Don't go back in there, my neighbor warned, clutching my arm with bony fingers. Her breath came in shallow gasps, her eyes wide and glistening with fear. It's not safe, a thunderous snap echoed from the tree line. I felt it more than heard it, a visceral tremor that reverberated through the ground. The shape lurked just beyond my vision, circling like a predator, its laughter morphing into something darker, something hungry. It felt like it knew us. Knew our fears and desires, and it was playing with them like a marionette on strings. No, I urged, my voice trembling. We need to get inside. I tugged her toward the door, but she hesitated, her wide-eyed gaze fixed on the trees. Please, we can't stay out here. A flare of light erupted from the ridge, bright and sudden, blinding in its intensity. I stumbled back, momentarily dazed. When my vision cleared, I saw its silhouettes entwined with the flames, their bodies swirling like fireflies, each movement a sinister dance that seemed to weave into the shadows surrounding us. More figures lurched from the darkness, and I felt the ground tremor beneath their weight. "Run!" I screamed, pulling at my neighbor's arm. We shot into the house, slamming the door behind us. Instantly, the whispers intensified, swirling around us like a tornado of words in a language both ancient and grotesque. I turned the lock with shaking hands, the sound echoing like the tolling of a colossal bell. In the dim light of the living room, the atmosphere shifted, becoming thick with dread. I could feel eyes intense, probing from every dark corner. The air was electrified, tingling against my skin. I glanced back at my neighbor, whose face had turned ashen. The crescendo of whispers crescendoed into a chorus of horrific, inhuman shrieks, punctuated by the unmistakable sound of scratching. It came from the walls, the floors, as if something was desperately trying to break through. Each scratch called to me, a sinister invitation that beckoned me closer, promising the revelation of untold secrets. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, voice barely audible. It's inside. I shook my head violently, backing against the front door. The laughter from outside had morphed into a sinister chant, growing louder, clamoring for attention, the kind of attention one gives to a ghastly spectacle they can't look away from. My instincts screamed at me to flee. But in that moment, I was transfixed by fear, captured in the web of whispers and shadows. Suddenly, there was a sharp crack, like splintering wood. My heart raced. I turned slowly to the stairs. Every instinct told me to run, yet I felt rooted, the very essence of curiosity clawing at my soul. The whispers climbed higher, more insistent, entwining themselves around my thoughts. I stepped back, the floor creaking beneath my weight, and that's when I saw it. A pair of eyes, glinting in the dark of the hallway leading to the basement. They were unmistakably human, but the way they stared, hungrily, void of reason, sent a chill through my spine. A creeping realization settled over me: they were not my eyes nor a friend's. These were the eyes of someone lost, tangled in horrors I couldn't begin to fathom. "Run!" I screamed again, the word tearing from my throat like a plea. But the eyes blinked slowly, almost mockingly, and my scream caught in the choke of terror thickening my throat. And then, without warning, the door behind us rattled violently, as if trying to free itself from its hinges, and I knew, whatever sought entry was ready and willing to break through. The mocking chant crescendoed while a shadow glided along the wall, transforming into a figure, its shape fluid and unnatural, eyes fixed on me with a predatory gleam. "Help me," it whispered, a voice both familiar and utterly alien, weaving into my mind like poison, a call I couldn't resist. In that moment, something shattered within me, and as the darkness swallowed all light, I realized I was no longer alone, and whatever lived in the shadows was now awake. The darkness pressed in on all sides, wrapping around me like a suffocating cloak. I could barely breathe, each gasping inhale laced with the fetid odor of decay and despair. The figure before me oscillated between familiarity and monstrousness, its features shifting like molten wax. My heart pounded in my chest, echoing loudly in the oppressive silence that followed the rattling of the door. "Help me," the voice beckoned again, curling around my psyche, igniting memories I had buried deep within. It felt like listening to a distant song that once brought comfort, yet now rang with sinister undertones. My neighbor stood frozen beside me, eyes wide with horror, her breath shallow as she swayed slightly with the rhythm of my panic. The shadows began to pulse like a heartbeat, resonating with the figure that loomed ever closer. "Don't listen," she finally cried, the words almost lost amidst the growing murmurs of the house. But I found myself entranced. Every instinct screamed to flee, yet the urge to step toward that pleading figure tugged at something primal within me. Its eyes, once so hollow and void, were now shimmering with a desperate plea that felt almost like a lifeline. "That we need to leave." My neighbor's voice stirred me, breaking the spell momentarily. She grabbed my arm with surprising strength, a jolt of reality snapping me back. I tore my gaze away from the figure just as its mouth opened wider, revealing jagged teeth that dripped darkened saliva, a grin far too unnatural to be anything but ravenous. My instinct surged, the talk of flight strangling me as I lunged for the door. But before I could reach the handle, the walls shuddered violently, a deep growl wrapping around us, a sound that felt so ancient it shook the very foundation beneath our feet. The whispers synchronized, rising like a tide from every crevice and crack, drowning out my thoughts. "Help you?" I rasped, my voice hoarse with confusion and terror. "From what?" The figure leaned closer, its breath cold and stinging as it whispered, "From the pain inside. Get back." My neighbor screamed, pulling me away harshly. Another lurch shook the house, and a crumbling sound echoed from above. The ceiling groaned like a dying animal, tangible horror descending upon us. I stumbled, heart pounding in panic as the world spun like a dark carnival ride gone awry. Around me, furniture warped with a life of its own, as if the very house was alive and breathing. Shadows cracked and flickered across the walls, while the figure persisted, relentless in its pursuit of my attention. "What have you done?" It rasped, confusion flickering then vanishing, replaced by something much darker. "You can't escape your fate." My neighbor yanked me again, pulling me toward the back of the house, but a horrific shriek ripped from my throat when the transparent figure suddenly darted toward us, its form expanding and contracting unnaturally, growing darker with speed. The air crackled, I could taste fear on my tongue, sharp and metallic. Each step I took backward brought me closer to the horror of the door and the figure behind it. My vision blurred as the shadows danced erratically around us, more figures emerging from the gloom like grotesque marionettes, their limbs splayed at unnatural angles. "Your mind is my playground," the voice taunted, weaving through the crescendo of chaos that engulfed us. "I've been waiting so very long." Blood thundered in my ears as I pressed myself against the wall, feeling it pulse with ominous energy. I couldn't focus on the whispers anymore, they twisted together into a sensual song, a lullaby beckoning me to join them, to forget who I was. I glanced at my neighbor, who now shrieked, twisting away from me as her eyes turned glassy, transfixed on a shadow lurking within the room. One of the grotesque figures lunged forward and grabbed her wrist with a grip that felt like ice. "She's always been mine," it hissed, voice dripping with malice as it pulled her toward the depths of the darkness. No. I shouted, lunging toward her, but before I could reach her, the floor buckled beneath my feet. And I plunged into blackness. I landed in a crumpled heap, disoriented. The air was thick with a damp chill, and for a moment, silence enveloped me. Then, slowly, whispers pierced through the void. "She was warned. Now she will join us." My heart seized as I pushed myself up, blinking into the heavy dark that pressed against me. But as my vision adjusted, dread pooled in my stomach. I was no longer in my house, I was somewhere else altogether. The ground felt grave-like, a cold stone beneath me that pulsed with life. A faint light flickered ahead, drawing me in. As I stumbled forward, the figure shimmered into view, and I realized it wasn't just my neighbor who was trapped here. Faces swirled around me, trapped in an eternal torment, each one crying out, pleading for release, each face grotesquely familiar, each one belonging to someone I had ever known. Was it really their fate to be imprisoned like this? My breath caught in my throat, the horror crashing over me as I spun to run, but the shadows bloomed, and laughter rang out, resonating within the confines of my mind. "Welcome home," echoed the whispers as they tightened around me, wrapping me in an embrace of despair. And as I felt the darkness wink out the last flickers of light, I realized I was no longer myself. I was already a part of the shadows. Before I could comprehend the full horror of my fate, a blinding light erupted, shattering the darkness momentarily, and through the chaos, I caught sight of a figure standing at the threshold, the most familiar figure of all, smiling with dark intent, hands extended toward me. "Come," it beckoned, the voice echoing in monstrous glee, "your place is with us now." And then, just as quickly, the light extinguished, plunging me back into the depths of shadow, where reality fractured further, dissecting into 1,000 seething horrors. Cloaked in despair, I felt my scream reverberate through the void, a cacophony of fear that merged into the cauldron of lost souls swirling below. The ground trembled beneath me, a living thing thrumming with unholy energy, and I staggered back, desperate to escape from the cacophony of tortured voices that curled and twisted around me like smoke. Each face, familiar yet grotesque, wore an expression of disdain toward me, their eyes wide with pleading that morphed into fury, as if blaming me for their eternal suffering. Panic surged within me, blood pounding in my ears, as I turned to flee into the thickening shadows, but the laughter tore through the air again, crackling and echoing as if laughing at the futility of my escape. "You think you can run?" They jeered, their voices layered, looping like a macabre chant. "You're already here, already one of us." Shadows writhed across the stone floor, enveloping my legs, pulling me back toward the cursed ground where my previous life felt like an illusion fading into darkness. Barely able to breathe, I steeled myself, mustering the last remnants of my will, and I forced my legs into motion, pushing through the throngs of faceless misery gathering at my feet. Each step screamed of anguish, souls wailing in a dissonant harmony, a morbid symphony of forgotten nightmares. "No!" I shouted, feeling my voice rise above the din, desperate for a chance, for a shred of hope. "Let me go. I don't belong here." Their laughter rippled around me like waves crashing upon a rocky shore. "It's too late," they chanted in unison, whispering my name, their words like daggers piercing through my mind. "You have always belonged. You have always been ours." The chase became a dance, a morbid interplay between despair and defiance as I pushed against the tide of despair, desperate to break free of my past only to find it hauntingly intertwined with the present. I felt the cold breath of the figure behind me, its presence bearing down, darkness flowing like a suffocating shroud. Dread clawed at my heart as I reached a precipice, a jagged edge into a realm of deeper shadows. Somewhere in that abyss, a fog rolled, obscuring whatever lay beyond. I glanced back, my breath hitching at the sight of the figures massing, eager, with haunting smiles etched upon their faces, hands reaching, trying to beckon me into their twisted realm, and then I saw something more terrifying. My neighbor's form lurked behind them, her eyes glassy but fixated on me, mouth moving in frantic whispers. "Help me," she mouthed, but as I looked closer, the shadows gripped her tighter, transforming her plea into a mockery. "Your choice," the shadows taunted, swirling like a hurricane of misery. "Join her, or remain forever in anguish." Adrenaline surged through my veins, and I could hear my heart pounding in my ears. I turned forward, nearly stepping off the precipice, and felt an unseen force tugging me, urging me to surrender to the pull of the void. The light dimmed further, and the distant piercing cry of a child echoed from the depths, a sound devoid of life and hope, a sound that shattered my resolve. "Please," I begged, the words slipping from my lips like blood from a wound. "I can't stay here." But the shadows merely relished in my despair, and with a final surge of horror, I felt the swirling mass of darkness rush toward me, devouring the last remnants of light as it reached out like ravenous hands intent on claiming me. "Welcome home," they sang, and it felt like death's embrace closing in. Just as I thought it was all over, a sharp sound cut through the dread. A single, potent word pierced the cacophony: "No." My breath caught, and I spun around once more as the voice reverberated through the void, this time familiar and strong, slicing through the haze that enveloped me. It was my mother, her silhouette emerging from the shadows, eyes blazing with love and defiance. "I will not let you go," she declared, fiercer than anything history had shown, her arms reaching toward me. But all at once the ground convulsed, a powerful force erupting from the depths that flung both of us back, my mother's face contorting into fear as she slipped out of sight, swallowed whole by the ravenous shadows. "Join us!" echoed their collective chorus, transcending all reason, merging my fate with the unsettling turmoil around me. I felt my feet lift from the ground, hovering at the edge of the abyss, torn between two worlds as the specters encircled me like vultures, hungry for my soul. The whispers grew louder, chanting my name, melting together to form a deep, dread-laden prophecy. "You will join our ranks. You will scream your last." And then I felt my strength begin to fracture. The scream I had suppressed boiled up within me, teetering at the precipice of reason. I would either succumb to the currents of darkness, or my voice would erupt, shattering the malevolent illusion that sought to engulf me. Before I could decide, the shadows convulsed, a monstrous figure bursting forth in an array of terrifying shapes, and as my heart raced, poised at the brink of an unimaginable choice, All I could hear was the thunderous laughter mixed with an overwhelming desperation as they descended upon me. In that moment, with fear and rage battling within my heart, a decisive action split the air. I let out a scream, a pelting vortex of sound that shattered the dread as the darkness rippled and quaked, and the world around me fractured, leaving only a deafening silence in its wake. But as the chaos stilled, at the center of the nothingness, two glowing eyes ignited in the void, and a voice that chilled me to the bone echoed, "You shouldn't have screamed." And then the ground beneath me gave way entirely. Falling into the abyss was less like plummeting and more akin to being swallowed by a blackened maw, where time unraveled and dread gestated in the flickers of uncertainty. The free fall was interminable, a never-ending descent into darkness, where the world above me, my home, became an insubstantial figment, fading like a mirage. As I fell, the silence enveloped me. It was a physical presence, pressing against my eardrums, suffocating my hope. I braced myself for impact, yet there was none. Instead, a sudden shift unspooled the shadows, whispering secrets I wasn't ready to hear. The air thickened, swirling with rancid warmth that wrapped around me, turning my stomach. From within the inky dark, shapes slithered, gnarled features forming against the backdrop of endless night. "Welcome back," they hissed in unison, their voices like silver webs spun from nightmares, weaving around my thoughts. Each syllable curled around the edges of my sanity, squeezing relentlessly. "You thought we were done with you. You thought wrong." Terror warped the boundaries of my mind as I landed not on solid ground but upon a sludgy mixture of earth and something more sinister, pulsating beneath me. I twisted my head, trying to perceive my surroundings, but every flicker of movement seemed to draw shadows closer, obscuring everything familiar within layers of malevolence. The figures around me coalesced into skeletal forms, smirking grotesquely, their hollowed eyes pinning me with malevolent glee. "I can't be here," I gasped, scrambling to my feet, my fingers sinking into the loamy surface. I pushed against the filthy earth, urgency thrumming within me. "Let me go." "Go?" The mocking tone rang through the air, a laugh bereft of humor. "Why would you want to leave? This is your sanctuary, your true home." Hands reached out from the murk, thin and spindly, brushing against my skin with an icy caress that sent chills racing along my spine. Suddenly, the ground shivered, and the cacophony of whispered voices crescendoed into a jarring whilom overwhelming sound that seemed to claw at my very essence. A river of shadow fanned out before me, its surface bubbling with unseen malice, and from beneath it, more faces surfaced, twisting in agony, their mouths stretched wide in screams muted by a dreadful silence. My heart thudded painfully against my ribs as recognition snaked through me. Very familiar visage drawn from my past, claiming their place in this infernal tableau of despair. "Help us," they begged collectively, but their pleas morphed seamlessly into the malevolent growl of the shadows. I stumbled back, horrified as the figures maligned into a single entity, rising amidst a tempest of anguish. "You can help us by joining our ranks. No." My voice splintered the air, but the words felt weaker than I intended, mere breath against the encroaching darkness. "I need to understand why. Why you're here." "Why I'm here?" A cold laughter rang through the mist, jagged against my skin, and then the shadows recoiled, forming a grotesque face, its mouth stretching impossibly wide into a smile more wicked than any could imagine. "Curiosity is not only unwelcome, it is sacrificial." I recoiled, scrabbling backward until I hit something hard, a wall of darkness, insistent and ominous. There was no escape, yet my spirit ignited with an instinctual urge to fight. If I have to face this madness, then I will find a way to break it, and with that bold declaration, a fiery surge ignited within me. I focused on the warmth spiraling in my chest and shattered it outward in a dazzling glare. Light burst forth, purging the shadows, bathing the grotesque faces in a stark white that illuminated their eternal torment. Their agonized shrieks twisted into howls of outrage, echoing within the confines of the gloom, but that light drew the gaze of something ancient and unfathomable watching from the depths of this surreal nightmare. A massive shadow loomed, vast and stretched beyond comprehension, pulsating with the void's essence, and its presence dimmed my feeble brightness with an insatiable hunger. "I have witnessed the patterns of your bloodline for generations," it rasped, each word heavy, like the weight of countless horrors. You cannot fathom what you've awakened. With every ounce of resolve, I stood tall, knowing somehow that defiance was my only weapon. I will not succumb to you. I spat, determination spilling into the air like a wild flame threatening to set the world alight, yet even as I spoke, the entity shifted, expanding outward to envelop me, a living tapestry of the very despair I sought to escape. Then let me show you the ultimate hunger. Then, without warning, the ground heaved violently, and what I stood upon fell apart, a rift forming as I was dragged toward it, the cries echoing around me. I flailed desperately, grasping at tendrils of shadows that sought to pull me deeper into the maw of the unknown. As I screamed against the darkness, a fanged maw opened far below, and a haunting voice whispered from its depths, "You are merely a piece on a board you cannot hope to understand." And then, with one final pull, I was consumed entirely into the abyss, relinquished to the infinite night, the whispering dread echoing in my ears, and then silence. But just before the last vestige of consciousness flickered out, a heartbeat slow, deliberate somewhere in the pitch void, resonated like a drum firing a shot of chilling chaos through my being. The silence that ensued was more oppressive than the chaos before, wrapping around me like a cloak woven from despair. I drifted through an abyss where time seemed to unravel, lost between moments, between breaths, between lives. The heartbeat pulsed through the darkness, each thud reverberating against the walls of my mind, and I realized it did not belong to me. With each pulse, a flicker of something monstrous danced just out of reach in the depths of the void. Panic clawed violently at my insides as I struggled against the weightlessness, against the suffocating shadows that pressed upon my chest. "What do you want from me?" I shouted into the void, though the vacuum swallowed my voice whole, leaving nothing but haunting echoes that taunted my sanity. But the heartbeat quickened, a symphony of dread that harmonized with the dissonance of my racing thoughts. As if tethered by my fear, the darkness began to morph, shadows twisted and writhed, forming grotesque figures that bore my likeness, me face twisted in agony, my features contorted into expressions of pure terror. They danced around me, meshing with the depths in a sinister ballet, their laughter weaving into a chilling melody. "Join us," came a voice that was both familiar and alien. It was the voice of my mother, yet laced with malice. "We're waiting for you." Nausea clawed at my throat as the figures lunged forward, each morphing into a part of that insatiable hunger, the very essence of despair swirling like a maelstrom. I fought back instinctively, summoning every ounce of willpower remaining within me, but it felt futile against these living nightmares. Rivulets of darkness streamed from their grinning mouths, pulling me deeper into the murky depths of this otherworldly plane. Why? Why are you doing this?" I pleaded, desperation spilling from my lips as the shadows wrapped tighter, slippery and insidious. They halted, freezing in motion as the world around me stilled. Moments quivered in anticipation before their faces twisted into cruel smirks. "It's your destiny. You cannot escape your blood's legacy. You belong to the dark," they taunted. With a sudden explosion, they lunged forward, crashing into me with an immense force, pushing me down, deeper into the fathomless terror. Gasping, I found myself submerged in the chilling embrace of a murky pool where whispers intertwined with sharp bites of ice. "Please!" I cried, reaching out, my fingers grazing the surface as the shadows began to pull me under. Awareness flickered like a dying flame, and just as my lungs burned with the need for air, a vision flashed before me, mother standing in stark contrast to this abyss, her face healthy, radiant, a soft light spilling from her. "Find me!" she cried, though her words came coated in regret, dissipating like petals caught in a waking breeze. An unyielding surge of determination overcame the chill that gnawed at my bones. Fueled by the love I had for the person who nurtured me, I thrashed wildly against the inky depths, breaking through the surface with a sudden desperation that blinded me. Bursting upward, I hit against the unseen barrier, gasping for breath, feeling warmth on my face, a glow that seemed to pierce through layers and layers of despair. But that radiant warmth twisted and warped, refracting into something unearthly, monstrous. A figure emerged from the hazy light, silhouetted against purity, its shape grotesque, more an echo of horror than a true being. The light flickered, casting shadows across its features, eyes like black holes swirling with embers of the void, a gaping mouth lined with teeth sharper than the fate awaiting me. My heartbeat synchronized with the terrible pulse from before, and the figure leaned in, a terrible grin creeping across its face. "You wish to understand," it rasped, each word dripping with malice and truth. "Here lies your blood's legacy, and your destiny intertwines with this cursed existence." Just then, all light extinguished, and I was plunged back into darkness, the overwhelming weight of dread pressing down with an unbearable force. I could feel the swirling shadows gathering again, the grotesque figures closing in around me. Their voices became a cacophony, a symphony of voices urging me to forsake the light, to embrace my destiny, let go. They screamed, but as I squeezed my eyes shut, fighting the inevitable pull toward despair, a searing pain struck through my abdomen, sharp and unyielding. I looked down, horrified to see my Badino, the figure that was morphing once more, twisting beyond recognition as the shadows enveloped me completely. "I won't become like you," I screamed into the darkness. But my voice was drowned beneath the chorus of cruel laughter swelling all around me. And then, in a shocking revelation, the horrific truth pierced me: I was never meant to escape this hell. I was merely a conduit. Another sacrifice offered to sate the endless hunger that thrived in the dark. The shadows lunged as I stood paralyzed, and the last fleeting thought filled my mind before the darkness reclaimed me: what had I awakened and what horrors awaited the world now that I was bound to this infernal realm? And then, through the chaos, a chilling whisper crawled over my skin, echoing around me like a death knell. "Let the games begin." The grip of the darkness tightened, an icy embrace wrapping around my limbs as I felt the remnants of my consciousness slip away, fading into the depths of despair. The laughter grew louder, echoing through the void like the toll of a cursed bell, reverberating against the walls of my mind with each cruel chime. It was a mocking requiem, a serenade to my impending doom. But then, a gust swept through the shadows, chilling me to the bone, carrying with it a scent so grotesque it made my stomach churn, a scent of decay, of something long forgotten, mingling with the acrid tang of fear. The shadows twisted, morphing into something more sinister, less defined but infinitely more dangerous. Tendrils of darkness slithered through the air, seeking flesh, seeking warmth to quench their unending hunger. Suddenly, a scream split the murky silence, a heart-wrenching, raw sound that clawed at my insides. It was a cry I recognized, a sound that resonated in my soul. It was the unfiltered terror of someone I loved, echoing through the abyss that had become my prison. My heart raced faster than my thoughts could catch up, and I thrashed against the binding shadows, desperately seeking the origin of the anguished wail. "Mom!" I cried, straining against the unseen bonds that held me captive, pulling at the tendrils that scraped against my skin like barbed wire. Panic surged deep within me, merging with an overwhelming sense of rage. I refused to be consumed without a fight. I would not let her become prey to the same darkness that threatened to claim me. The shadows recoiled for a fleeting moment, as if surprised by my defiance. Then, a ripple of dark amusement passed through them, and the shadows whispered sweetly, "So brave, so foolish," but their words only fueled my determination. I strained against the fabric of the void, clawing through the suffocating darkness until, at last, I felt my fingers brush against something warm and solid skin. My mother's warm skin, pulsing with the breath of life that had been so cruelly snatched away. I grasped for her hand, ripping through the blackness that sought to keep us apart. "Hold on," I gasped, pulling with all my strength until I felt her fingers slip into mine, a flame igniting against the cold that sought to suffocate us. As our hands connected, a blinding light erupted, illuminating the abyss. For a nanosecond, hope surged through me, and I caught a glimpse of her face, sunken, haunted, yet unmistakable. But as quickly as it flickered, the light dimmed, drawn into the gaping maw of an unimaginable horror that loomed just beyond the brightness. The breath of whatever lurked in that void brushed against my skin, crisp and languorous, wrapping me in a cold sheet of dread. "Join us!" It ravened, a chorus of dark voices entwining with the very fabric of our beings. The shadows coalesced, solidifying into a monstrous figure shaped from lost souls, its form shifting like the tides of a restless sea. Eyes horrific, infinite voids bored into my very existence, promising blissful madness if only I would succumb. The pressure building around us intensified, causing my body to tremble. "No!" I shouted, and with all the will I could muster, I yanked my mother toward me, wrapping us both in an embrace fortified by fierce, unyielding love. Time collided upon itself, stretching into an infinity of agonizing moments, and as I pulled her closer, I felt her essence begin to fade, warmth dispersing like smoke in the cool, damp air. "You have to fight," I cried, panic rising as I felt the darkness drifting between us, threatening to sever the bond that pulsed with unrestrained love. "Please, we can't let them take you." Bordering on madness, I jerked backward, turning and facing the gaping maw of terror head-on. "Show yourself," I yelled into the abyss, voice cracking like thunder amidst a storm. "If you want me, come and get me." The darkness roared with laughter, a deep, gravelly sound that swallowed the light whole. In that very instant, reality trembled on the brink of destruction as shadows lunged toward us, spiraling and churning through the air like rabid serpents. I could feel their breath, hot and rancid, brushing against my skin as they clawed for what I held dear, and then, in one massive surge, the monstrous figure lunged forward, and as I faced my doom, I realized there was no escape. The last shred of light flickered and dimmed, a final spark extinguishing as darkness engulfed me whole, but just before the shadows closed in for the kill, I heard it barely above a whisper, slicing through the cacophony around us. "You have been chosen." A blinding flash erupted as cold claws gripped my mind, snapping me back into an agonizing consciousness, and there, at the precipice of the horror, I beheld a new truth emerge from the shadows. Something stirred inside me, an awakening that sent icy fingers down my spine, leaving nothing but an echo of dread, and as the darkness loomed closer, I felt a pulse beat within my chest, a heartbeat that was not my own. The icy grip within me tightened, synchronizing with the otherworldly heartbeat thrumming from some shadowed recess, wrapping me in a sinister rhythm that began to drown out my own. The moment that grotesque sound flooded my ears, a bone-chilling realization struck. I was no longer just a prisoner ensnared in the suffocating darkness. I had become a vessel for something much darker, something that pulsed with untold malice. No longer feeling like a mere spectator, I sensed the entity clawing for control, whispering insidious invitations, coaxing my very essence to merge with its shadowed self. Panic surged through me, igniting every primal instinct as I fought back, struggling against the parasitic presence that sought to claim my will. "Get out of my head!" I screamed, but my voice was swallowed by the onslaught of laughter echoing in the void, deep and mocking. Just as I thought the shadows might scrape the last vestiges of my soul from the earth, they turned their focus towards something else, something even more sinister. A series of guttural sounds erupted from the pitch-black mist swarming around me, their echo interlaced with soft, pleading cries, tainted, desperate calls for help that I couldn't ignore. The heartbreaking wails bore an uncanny familiarity, sending tendrils of fear creeping up my spine like spiders skittering across my flesh. I stumbled back, an invisible hand gripping my throat, tightening its noose as the sounds grew louder, morphing into the twisted laughter of lost souls. Focusing beyond the shadows, I suddenly caught a glimpse of something flickering, a faint glow that danced hesitantly at the edge of my vision. I turned toward it, and what I saw made my heart plummet into a chasm of despair. Emerging from the darkness, pale faces contorted in anguish stretched out toward me, their hollow eyes filled with terror and hunger, mouths agape in silent screams. They swirled through an endless maelstrom, fierce and endless images of despair caught in a ghastly loop, forever trapped, forever tortured. In their midst, I recognized a face, one that stirred memories long concealed beneath layers of pain. A haunting figure floated just beyond the reach of the darkness, her features hauntingly familiar. My mother, though her essence was obscured, her face worn and lacking the light that once filled her eyes. "Help me, please!" she gasped, her voice evaporating into the gloom. The moment I reached for her, the shadows seized me. Tendrils whipped out, tearing at flesh, urging me to succumb to the darkness. No. I howled, desperation lending me unnatural strength as I fought against the relentless shackles. Pulling with every ounce of will, I stretched outward, reaching for the flicker of light once more, but the shadows snatched at my fingertips, sending violent shivers racing through my limbs. Just as I felt the connection with her starting to slip away, something deep within bristled to life, clawing at my soul in rebellion against the encroaching darkness. The heartbeat thudded stronger, resonating with a raw power, and in a fit of defiance, I broke free from the suffocating grasp, gasping as warmth flooded back through my veins. I staggered to the flickering light, growing brighter, my mother's ethereal form hovering on the precipice of the abyss. "Choose," she urged, voice trembling, words reverberating within me like a chant for salvation. That I stood at the edge of an impossible divide, and something within me swirled, something intertwined with the very fabric of despair I had just escaped. An insatiable hunger clawed at my gut, a temptation towards that unknown power that pulsed beneath my skin. I teetered, glancing back at the floating faces that writhed hungrily, imploring me to lose myself in their macabre embrace. "Choose." My mother cried again, panic coloring her voice, and in that moment, the shadows withdrew slightly, as if they sensed the scale tipping toward one side. I felt a cold sweat pool on my brow, mind spiraling between the light and the dark, but the heartbeat quickened, amplifying until it drowned out the very pulse of my essence. "Join me, be one with me," it hissed, an alluring song that harmonized with the chaos around me, as the monstrous visage of the entity I had faced before coalesced nearby, its hollow eyes fixated on me with insatiable hunger. With a fierce shudder, I understood I was not merely facing the darkness outside, but the burgeoning dread within. In that ephemeral moment, I was caught between the rush to save my mother and the sinister call to embrace the power that roiled within me, and as shadows encroached once more, I felt the final threads of my will thin to a breaking point. Just then, a blinding flash erupted from the depths of my being, and a cascade of memories surged forth, perhaps not my own, but of those entangled with me, those lost in the void, forever seeking release. That in an agonizing moment of clarity, I was faced with a choice: stay tethered to the world of light to save the one I loved, or embrace the darkness within, losing myself to an unfathomable terror. But as I fought with myself, the darkness lunged forward, and shadows twisted into claws. I could feel the entity laughing, a sinister echo enveloping me as I hung on the edge of hopelessness. "Choose, choose now," and as I stood there, heart pounding, the echoes of my mother's voice faded into the consuming darkness, leaving me with only one haunting realization: I was poised not on the brink of choice, but on the edge of annihilation. The darkness surged, and I could feel myself tipping into what I could not yet comprehend, but the churning shadows beckoned. With a final lunge, I braced myself, knowing deep within I was going to discover the truth of my own darkness at the cost of my very soul. The blinding flash dissipated, and in the suffocating aftermath, I lost all sense of time and place. I fell, or perhaps I was dragged, into a murky expanse that felt both intimately familiar and horrifyingly foreign. The blackness enveloped me like a shroud, intensifying the throbbing ache in my chest that echoed with memories of my mother's desperate pleas that I landed softly, or perhaps it was the shadows that cushioned my descent. The ground felt spongy, as if I were floating on a dark pool that rippled silently beneath me. The air was thick and palpable, weighing down on my shoulders. It smelled of decay, like damp earth and rotting wood, mixed with something acrid that stung at my nostrils. Panic gnawed at me from the inside, accompanied by the rhythmic heartbeat that now seemed to emanate from deep within the very essence of this nightmare. As I struggled to gather my wits, shadows coalesced into grotesque shapes that scuttled just beyond my vision, whispering half-formed secrets of despair. I felt their presence all around me, encircling me, their phantom fingers brushing against my skin with a chill that sent shivers spiraling down my spine. That I hesitated, feeling the pull of the dark depths where the faces of the lost now seemed to flicker into existence. Pale lips whispered my name, gasping in tones laced with anguish. "Join us," the murmur echoed, each syllable a dagger carving into my resolve. Compelled by the urgency of the familiar yet terrified by the unfathomable, I took a tentative step forward through the ink-black expanse, the shadows curling around my feet like hungry serpents. The ground shifted uneasily beneath me, as if reluctant to accept my presence. Suddenly, the fog around me parted, revealing a haunting sight: a labyrinthine corridor of twisted trees, their gnarled limbs yearning skyward like skeletal fingers clawing for salvation. Hollowed trunks swayed with a sinister grace that suggests life, yet their empty eyes reflected only the void beneath. I felt the unsettling sensation of being watched, as though spirits lingered in the hushed, rustling leaves, bated breath before unleashing a torrent of hidden atrocities. There, at the end of the corridor, stood a solitary figure cloaked in tattered rags that swirled like smoke around an ephemeral form. Fear gripped my heart as recognition sliced through the haze. The entity that had loomed earlier, its grotesque features warped and indistinguishable. It turned slowly, and I was confronted by those hollow eyes that burned with a predatory hunger. "Welcome back," it rasped, each word oozing malice. That I stumbled backward, senses heightened by the creeping dread. Suddenly, it began to extend its hand. A twisted promise manifested. "You can have it all. The power, the truth, all of it," it beckoned, voice droning into a thunderous chorus that rose and fell with the heartbeat resonating within me. Staring into the abyss of its gaze, I felt the gravity of the darkness pulling me closer, a pulse of attraction greater than my own mortal fear. I remembered my mother. Her last words echoed in my mind, a desperate mantra pleading for connection amidst this suffocating void. "Choose," she had cried. But how could I possibly choose when each option threatened to obliterate my very essence? Then I noticed movement within the tree, a flicker that emerged from an outstretched branch. A small shadow scurried across the ground, and a soft voice broke through the oppressive air. "Help, please." The sound coiled around my heart, merging anguish and hope so seamlessly that it sent shivers of awareness lancing through me. "Choose." The entity screamed, its voice morphing into discordant laughter that rumbled through the corridor, shaking my sanity as I felt the shadow's facade peel away. The ghostly figure of a child stumbled into the feeble light, a gaunt face stretching toward me, wide eyes filled with despair. Recognition pierced through me like shards of glass. "My niece, missing for years. Return me to the light," she implored silently, reaching out with bony fingers. Time fractured within the darkness as I felt the very fabric of the dimension quake, the shadows swirling violently to reclaim what I had thought was mine. The heartbeat quickened, an ominous metronome that harmonized with my racing pulse. "Join me, or watch her perish." The entity howled, its voice a cacophony of hissing tongues. Desperation clawed at me from every direction, the instinct to protect rising like tidewater against my will to succumb to this all-consuming power. I was caught in a maelstrom of indecision, the two specters representing the invocations of my soul power and the remnants of love. "Choose now." The shadows grew thicker, contorting and undulating like a tempest around me, but my gaze remained locked on my niece, a reflection of both hope and fear, her presence flickering beneath the weight of spectral burdens. The world shuddered violently, threatening to unravel as I took one step forward, anchored to the unbearable tension of my soul, and then a bone-chilling whisper threaded through the chaos, unraveling time itself and exposing a grotesque truth I had yet to confront. "Not all who join the darkness find peace." With that, the clarity of my choice disintegrated into the ever-deepening night, as I wavered on the precipice between salvation and damnation. As the shadows converged around us, ready to snatch away my niece until she vanished from my very consciousness, I was left to question one irrevocable truth: had I already lost everything, or was the nightmare yet to begin? The darkness felt alive, an entity in itself, pulsating and breathing with a hunger I couldn't comprehend. I stood frozen, surrounded by shadows that twisted and curled like smoke, each flicker weaving tales of despair and dread. My pulse raced, pounding in my ears as I gazed into the void where my niece had disappeared, desperation clawing at my insides. Choose power or love? The grotesque figure loomed before me, eyes like pits of hungry darkness, drawing me closer with promises that tasted of ash and regret. But the moment I wavered, a realization swept through me, a chilling understanding of what lay beyond choice: power. I shouted, choking on the word. What power could possibly justify the sacrifice of innocence? I could feel their presence thrumming through my very essence, echoes of spirits who had seen the light, only to follow it into an eternal labyrinth of torment. Choose now, the entity hissed, its voice a cacophony, vibrating around me, snaking into my ears like a poisonous vine. I closed my eyes, fighting back the urge to yield to the darkness, to embrace the core of what it offered. Deep down, I could sense the sinister truth: I was destined to bear witness to this cycle of suffering, to be a vessel of their anguish. Even if I turned back, the shadows would still lurk, relentless in their pursuit, waiting for the faintest crack in my resolve, and that's when I felt its rhythmic heartbeat pounding in sync with my own. But it was different. No longer am I merely a spectator but a participant within this nightmare. The shadows trembled around me, and from the depths of their swirl, I saw my niece's face, a specter of light caught in a tempest of darkness. "Help me!" She cried silently, and with that plea, I felt the last vestiges of my humanity begin to unravel. "No!" I screamed, pushing against the suffocating weight of despair. I could not let the darkness claim her. With every ounce of strength I had, I turned my back on the entity. I choose to fight for my family. In that moment, a surge of warmth flowed through me, a fierce, blinding light ignited from within, scattering the shadows like leaves in a gale. I could feel it erupting from my heart, a radiant force fueled by love and defiance. As the figure shrieked in fury, the cacophony surrounding me shattered, driving back the malevolent tide. I reached forward, fingers outstretched, determined to pull my niece from the clawed hands of darkness, but the shadows regrouped swiftly, enveloping her, twisting around her fragile form like a predator playing with its prey. "You think you can save her?" The entity howled, rage twisting its features grotesquely. "She is already ours." I watched as my niece's expression flickered, caught in the clutches of an inevitable fate. The darkness wrapped tight around her, desperation transforming into the hope of salvation once more threatened to wither. "No! You won't take her!" I roared, feeling the very foundation of reality tremble beneath my feet as the shadows recoiled from my light, though I could hear them whispering, feeling my resolve thin. "You belong to us. You cannot control what you do not understand." The shadows diverted, merging back into the figure, their limbs entwining into a monstrous mass of anguish. The cruel truth spun in my mind: this terrifying darkness was born of my blood, of generations lost, a family legacy steeped in terror and despair. And now, it was my blood coursing through the veins of this cursed existence. "You are already claimed," echoed through the tempest of shadows, drowning out my thoughts. "You exist to feed the void." My heart sank as I realized my power was tied to this cruel legacy, but like a fire ignited by defiance, I would not bow down. Not now, not ever. I could escape this cycle once and for all, shattering the bond that had haunted my family for centuries. "Leave her. If you want me, you will not touch her." I screamed, the words tasting bitter in my mouth, yet strangely liberating, like chains snapping away. The very fabric of the shadows shook at my declaration, wailing in outrage as they pulled back from her, though not without a final surge of rage, clawing back to reclaim what they had lost. And in that moment a brilliant, shattering light exploded from within me, melting away the despair encasing us whole, revealing glimmers of faces long forgotten, all the family lost to this madness, each spirit beckoning, urging me to embrace the light once more. The shadows screeched, lashing out in violent fury, but I charged forward through the gathering storm, ignited by the courage of countless souls yearning for freedom. "Enough!" I shouted, throwing forth my hands in a desperate push, unleashing the collective strength of my family's cries. With a blinding flash, our voices fused together, echoing, reverberating through the darkness. At that irrefutable moment, I saw the Truvmi family had become a part of it, now spurring forth a light that shattered the very essence of despair and darkness that had imprisoned us all. Triumphant, I felt the shadows recoil, swirling and twisting in chaotic retreat. I grabbed my niece, pulling her from the maw of despair, her presence igniting the light further, pushing back the darkness surrounding us like a quaking storm. "You're safe," I gasped, relief flooding through me as we both felt the warmth growing, love blasting through the cold grip of shadows. But even as I clutched her small frame, a horrifying truth unfurled like a malignant flower in my mind. My actions had awakened something primordial, a hunger that lingered, a dark root buried deep within the earth, feeding off our very essence. Suddenly, the very ground trembled beneath our feet, and a shadow that was not a shadow rose from the remnants of despair, looming larger than anything I had ever encountered. Its eyes blazed with insatiable hunger, mirroring the same darkness within me, a reflection of the monstrous legacy I had not escaped, but merely delayed. And then everything lurched violently as reality warped and twisted, throwing us back into the dark abyss. "It's coming!" echoed the terrified voice of my niece, mirrored by the distant murmurs of despair as shadows lunged once more, willing to claim back what should have never been severed. "It will never stop," as we fell deeper into the consuming darkness, a chilling realization gripped my heart. This was a cycle without end, my escape only a temporary reprieve. The darkness surged around us, the shadows flooding in again, relentless and unforgiving. That primal hunger would always remain, and panic clawed at my throat as I held my niece desperately against me. Had I truly escaped? Or was I still bound by the dark legacy woven into my very soul, destined to carry its burden into eternity? The echoes of laughter rumbled through the void, mingling with the chanting shadows. You thought you could erase us? They taunted, dancing around the flickering light we forged together. But we are an unending hunger, a darkness reborn, and just as the screams of the past entwined with the present, one final truth resounded like the terrible toll of a funeral bell. The horrors I had encountered were only the beginning, and as the shadows engulfed us, a sickening whisper lingered in the air, melting into my bones. Let the horror within you awaken.